Questions? David.
What about that very cheerful talk? What about there's rumors that here at the southern border of the United States, there's rumors that Iran's tentacles are approaching here with our leaky border that's coming here too. Is there any truth to that we do know?
Yeah. So I think the answer is yes. It's not new. It's not a new phenomenon. We're just seeing it in public reporting now. There is this uptick that has happened in the last 3 years, where we've suddenly seen this major increase in attempted border crossings by people from terror watch list. That's an interesting statistic. But as far as Iranians getting caught at the border, we've seen reports of that for years. Hezbollah is very active in Latin America in the tri-border area. They run major cigarette trafficking out of there, and other drug trafficking as well. Obviously, it's one of the major pieces of Hezbollah's revenue. And Hezbollah, the FBI has reported on this for years, has a very strong connection to the Mexican cartels, and they're able to move things in and out of the United States, including people. The one good news, to be cheerful, is that there is this incredible reawakening of our domestic threats. If we're in Chicago, so we all remember Holy Land Foundation from like 20 years ago. If you remember that, southwest side of Chicago, the Bridgeview Mosque, the Hamas networks that were uncovered there, the indictments that got rolled out against Holy Land Foundation, the Islamic Association for Palestine. Remember Sami al-Arian down in Florida, and all those networks that were shut down that were tied to the PFLP. It was a major operation by the Treasury Department, the intelligence community, DOJ, FBI for years. We shut down a Hezbollah cell that was doing cigarette trafficking in North Carolina and Michigan in the late 90s. All those programs got turned off about 10 years ago because we shifted all our focus to counter ISIS, and all those people who we had been tracking for Hamas and PFLP and other things became sources to turn in people who were being recruited for ISIS. And so we also said, oh, the Israelis are collecting, and the intelligence side of Hamas, we don't have to do intelligence community collection. It's a waste of resources. So for 10 years, we have not been collecting on Hamas and other Palestinian terror networks, which means we don't know the operations they've reset up in the United States. We haven't had a Treasury Department sanctions program on any of them in over 10 years. The DOJ and FBI have been using these people as sources for counter ISIS instead of actually like Hamas terrorism. That's all changing. The outrage that has been coming from what you've seen on college campuses and what you've seen in the news is making everybody relook at who are these groups that are behind all this stuff. And you start looking at the networks and the maps and the wiring diagrams. They're literally the same people who did Holy Land Foundation in the same places in the country with P.O. boxes and offices down the street. And so with threat pictures starting to increase, radicalization here, stuff coming out of the mosques, FBI, intelligence community, Treasury are all under pressure now to relook at these networks and clamp down on them. And so if anything good comes out of this, I think we will actually start exposing and see indictments throughout the country for Hamas fundraising and terrorism connection.
Will, how do you think Israel will know when they eliminated Hamas?
So it's a great question. You've sort of seen their end state objectives, right? Which are Hamas no longer rules Gaza. You know, civilian control, command and control, and civilian control of the government is a metric you can look at. Are they actually running the government at this point? Are they actually in charge? Is anybody listening to them? Does anybody fear them? Do they operate police forces? Do they operate the prisons? By the way, somebody's going to need to do those things. So those are like metrics you can say, okay, have they achieved the actual removal of Hamas's power rule in Gaza? Gaza cannot be a platform for terrorism to threaten Israel over the long term. That one's a lot harder. What does that mean exactly? At what point, how much of Hamas infrastructure has been eliminated? How many people have you tracked down? What number of leaders? Remember Iraq when we had those baseball cards? The deck of cards, and they were like, we were hunting down like these 52 people, and like, oh, the Jack of Clubs just got hit. That's kind of what they're doing right now. They don't talk about it, but I understand they kind of have their own deck of cards. And so there's some combination of leadership that's been removed, plus the various headquarters and cells that they know of from their intelligence that they believe have been removed, where they say, okay, we're now moving from sort of an invasion mode to a response mode. And there's where you're also going to get into a little bit of international PR problem and a little bit of butting heads between the United States administration and Israel, and that has to do with what is the difference between long-term security control of Gaza and reoccupying Gaza. Israel has said they have no interest in reoccupying Gaza. The United States has said they won't allow Israel to reoccupy Gaza. Israel has said we will maintain long-term security control basically forever. We're not repeating the mistakes of 2005. You're talking about something, if you're familiar with the Oslo concept of Area B, where Israel maintains security control and the Palestinians have civilian control. That's going to create tension. It's going to be the same sort of tension and controversy that has existed in the West Bank for years and continues to in the international community. However, to be able to have intelligence on the ground, rapid response to time-sensitive targets, figure out where cells are and move in on them, there is no other option than keeping a significant IDF presence in Gaza for the foreseeable future.
What relation does the United States have, if any, with Qatar?
So last year we named them a major non-NATO ally, which is a great honor. We have, since right after the 9/11 attacks, had an Air Force base that has grown and grown and grown and grown over time. It is now our largest Middle East base. It's called the Combined Air Operations Command, or CAOC. It is Central Command's leading Air Force base in the Middle East. It was set up because we had no base of operations to launch the war and run the war against Afghanistan, a landlocked country. It then became a forward operating area for the war against Iraq as well. There's a lot of arguments about whether or not we need that base at this point. We've withdrawn from Afghanistan. We're not at war in Iraq. Iran is the greatest threat here, and this base is well within missile range, and so it's sort of like, what are we even talking about? There are other Gulf countries that would welcome that base. The UAE, we already have a base at Al Dhafra. We could pay, or they could pay, quite frankly, to move our forces out of Qatar. But the truth is that we have a very strong relationship with them on the military side and on the economic side. There are billions upon billions of dollars of Qatari money throughout the United States in financial investment firms. You may have seen the reports on how much money they've poured into universities over the last 20 years, Northwestern included. A lot of people think some of the things we see on college campuses are tied to that money. So it's a big problem. They also own most of Washington. They have lobbyists on the payroll. They have law firms on the payroll. They have PR firms on the payroll. They've gotten caught doing crazy things. They funded ISIS and Al-Qaeda in the 2010s. We caught them. We had a meeting and we set up some sort of counterterrorism, paperwork with them and moved on. At some point, there's going to have to be a reckoning. Just has to be. You cannot continue to provide safe harbor to Hamas. Now, Hamas might be destroyed in Gaza, but they're still going to exist, and their leadership still exists. Do they just continue to hang out at the Four Seasons in Doha like nobody cares about that? That's crazy.